Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with the esteemed Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we do not need to search for topics this week, Dr. Lopkin. It's all about deja vu all over again in the impeachment proceedings and actual conclusion. Go ahead.
It really is. I mean, who would have imagined that we'd be talking about impeachment twice for the same president?
And I agree. And the first one was completely ridiculous. The second one, he did not behave like a president. Is it impeachable? We can argue about that, but he brought it on himself, in my humble opinion.
He didn't behave presidentially, that I'll give you. Going forward with impeachment, though, it strikes me as ludicrous, especially since now that the House has impeached him, the trial in the Senate, which, remember, you can't remove a president without a trial. The trial is set to start at 1 p.m. January 20th. Joe Biden gets inaugurated at 2 p.m. January 20th.
No, it's a political charade. I get that. But you know something, for someone that supported Donald Trump, especially at the beginning, I mean, excuse my language, what a dumbass move.
It was a bad move, but if you listen to what he actually said, I mean, the big phrase that everybody's yelling about is he said, "March to the Capitol." Well, March to the Capitol has been used in a lot of protests, all of which up to this one have been peaceful. So that alone is not calling for violence. But more importantly, I am amazed at how many people are laying this at the feet of Donald Trump. Donald Trump was not the cause of this. He was the beneficiary of this. And you know this because we were talking about the possibility of this happening 6 years ago before Donald Trump ever ran for president.
And what was that, just to enlighten our listeners?
We were talking about the possibility of people actually taking up arms against the government. The discussion was on a broader scale of, are we ungovernable now? But the seeds of all of this predate Donald Trump's political career.
And I think that's a good point. I'm glad I asked you to kind of go over that one more time, because are we getting to a point where liberals hate conservatives, Republicans? I've been on the hikes, whatever, and they're friends. I mean, you know, Democratic friends, they basically think that Republicans are beyond reproach, and maybe vice versa. I mean, are we ungovernable? That's really the bigger issue. Donald Trump, presidents come and go, but, you know, Nixon was a divisive president, but nothing like this. I mean, the enemy camps, and I say that basically that's where we are right now, are enemy camps.
It has really gotten to that point, and it was highlighted so perfectly by a video that was released this week. The general counsel of PBS was caught on video saying that they should be throwing Molotov cocktails at the White House. Now, let's face it, you don't get much more liberal than PBS, and it's clearly nothing conservative about it. And this was discussed on the floor of the House. It was brought up because this is what America has turned into. We're actually looking at the idea that people are arming themselves because neither side trusts the other. I've been talking to some folks from all around the country, and when you leave the coasts, people are frightened Not of the conservatives. They are terrified that this liberal government is now going to start taking away their rights. Gun shops are having trouble keeping ammo in stock. This is how bad this is getting. Now, for all of our listeners, let's make this very clear. We do not condone violence from either side. It's the worst thing you can do. It does not help anything. And if we can keep this from happening, we have to do everything we can to do so. That being said, it shouldn't actually be a surprise that we've reached this point. I've spoken to folks who are literally trying to rewrite history. I had a conversation with someone who is very, very liberal, and she refused to accept that Lyndon Johnson was the president who got us into Vietnam. Now, that's not even a judgmental statement. It's simply a historical fact. And she was like, no, it was the Republicans that got us into Vietnam. They're actually trying to rewrite history.
Well, they've been doing that for years. I mean, when I say years, especially over the last 5 years, here's one of my biggest concerns, and Dr. Lopkin, please comment on this, is I think we've created a vacuum, and in any vacuum, it is always filled, and I think it's going to get filled by our adversaries. I think they're looking at America, and it's not America of 72 when you had Scoop Jackson and Nixon. They might be Democrat, Republican, but they got along, or even Reagan and Tip O'Neill. This is a whole different breed of cat. And yes, do I agree?
I mean, even more recently, Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich.
Exactly. But now we're well beyond that. And, they couldn't wait to impeach. And I know Nancy Pelosi, in terms of knowing her not personally, but her strategy, she sees this opportunity because she's a political hack / strategist. She knew she wanted all the Republicans on record saying yes or no, and that's the end.
That's exactly what she wanted, because now the Democrats in upcoming campaigns, when they run candidates against Republicans in Congress and the Senate, they will be able to say, this person refused to impeach Trump, and they will try to, build up their backers that way. I have to tell you,
they're going to show the video. Bob Johnson, obviously I'm making up the name, refused to vote for impeachment after blah, blah, blah. They'll have the video, and it's could get some traction, because I think Nancy Pelosi is not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree, but in terms of political strategy, she's awesome. Her father, that's all she has done her whole entire life. And she knew that for 2022, the Democrats might have a problem, and this was something that could help them.
I think that's what her plan was. I think she has vastly underestimated things. I actually think this is going to backfire on them. We've talked briefly on previous podcasts about the social media site Parler, where many conservatives were going to Parler and they were talking there. Well, for those of you not aware, Parler was pulled down this week. First, the app was removed from the app stores by both Apple and Google, and then Amazon, whose servers were hosting Parler, pulled the site down completely. The idea was they thought the speech on Parler was dangerous and it could cause more violence. Well, the fact of the matter is, you're talking about, I don't even think there was 100,000 people at the Capitol. I mean, there were several thousand, but I don't think it was even 100,000. But you had millions of people on Parler. So you've taken down a site that millions of people used because a small minority might have become more violent. Well, the backlash against this has already been huge, because now you've got conservatives up in arms that they are taking away their ability to communicate. They're taking away their platforms. I can't say they're taking away their First Amendment rights, because the First Amendment only applies to government, and this was done by private companies, but it has actually polarized people. The idea was that this was going to limit the damage, and instead it's gotten more people involved and possibly radicalized more people, which is more dangerous.
I think it's a good analysis. So where do we go forward? One question I want to ask you before we wrap it up is, does Donald Trump have a political future?
I don't think Donald Trump has a political future.
We agree on that, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah,
and he did it to himself.
Point,
wait, hold on. 3 weeks ago, he had a bright political future, didn't he?
3 weeks ago, he could have been a major force in the Republican Party. He could have been a major force in campaigns 2 years from now and 4 years from now. Now, all of that is gone.
Agreed. And I think Georgia didn't help him either.
Georgia did not help him. But here's the thing. Again, I've been talking to people all over the country, and as this has gone on, it hasn't necessarily had the effect you would have thought. I've spoken to people who did not believe that there was anything wrong with the 2020 election. These are people who believed everything was above board and, Biden won legitimately. Now they are actually questioning that belief. So you have more people saying, no, you know what? 2020, the election was actually stolen. And they're looking at the government, at media as, now, again, I don't want to say it's a conspiracy, because I do not believe there is a grand conspiracy. I don't even believe there was a grand conspiracy to steal the election. I think this was just local election fraud all over the place, working for the same goal, but they didn't coordinate it. So it's not an actual conspiracy. But now people are starting to understand what happened, and they're going, well, wait a minute. This is now basically a dictatorship. They stole the White House, they stole the Senate, and people are frightened.
I agree. I think that's, a topic for further discussion. I agree. And I believe if Biden and Pelosi overstep what they think is their doctrine, there may be further complications / problems. Final thought.
Well, I think there are going to be a lot of problems regardless of what they do. Essentially, the events of the last week have actually rendered us close to ungovernable. So the Republicans and the Democrats are not going to come together on anything. On top of that, you have internal strife in the Democratic Party, because the more centrist people that actually took seats in the House and were responsible for a lot of the victories in the Senate, they're at war with the more liberal, the AOCs, the Squad. So you have the Democratic Party splitting itself apart. So we are going to see, at least for the next 2 years, very little getting done other than arguing.
Interesting. Well, great edition of Carnivore Bites, and we'll be live on Friday, won't we, Dr. Lopkin, at 4 o'clock?
We'll see you Friday at 4 at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio.
Thanks again. Take care.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.